Hello everybody, it's the Lady Kaylah here, and welcome to the geekdom / my messy room, which you can't really tell, but oh my gosh, I don't know how I live in this thing. I'm doing this video kind of just talking out of my ass because I did not really plan on, I didn't really sketch this out. I mean, I had the idea, oh, I should do a video on this topic, but I haven't sketched it out, and sometimes I do it in my head or sometimes I write it down, but I didn't at all for this video. So sorry if it's all over the place, but I really want to do this video, especially since Game of Thrones is coming and season 3 is coming, and it kind of applies because I'm talking about purists, people who do not like something being adapted or made into some other form other than its original. And so this has to do with Game of Thrones because I read A Song of Ice and Fire a couple years before the show came out, before the show was even talked about. So I actually had this kind of experience and this internal conflict between will I like it, will I not like it, a lot of reservations, a lot of things just held inside me. And so when I think about what I went through when I found out A Song of Ice and Fire was going to be adapted into a TV show, I kind of had some of these issues going on, and I wanted to talk about that. Talk about purists and people who just do not like something being adapted or remade or changed in any way. And to an extent, I can understand. I mean, a lot of the times things are messed up. Especially with movies. When it comes to movies, chances are, it's not going to come out so great. And so I understand kind of being held oh, they're only doing it for the money, they're not going to care about the actual quality or so on and so forth. So I understand having a fear, but then there's just those people who absolutely cannot stand any changes to the original material, and they just automatically just harden themselves against it, and it's just really, you're not even going to give it a chance, you're not even going to wait to see if it's actually okay or good. And so that's just what bothers me. But then I think about stuff that I went through, and it's just kind of you have this idea that something's kind of yours. It's not really, but you really like it, you feel close to it, some of your favorites, and then sometimes when it gets adapted, it gets blown up and made really popular if it's good, and that was the case with A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. And so, you have something that you really like, and, it's not so popular, so you feel you feel kind of cool, sharing it and be oh, have you read this book? And they're oh, no, and I'm oh, you should read it. And then all of a sudden the show comes out and everyone knows who it is, and everyone and their mother has read the books or watched the show or something. And to an extent, that's great, because there's more people you could come up to and be hey, have you watched Game of Thrones or read the books? And chances are they're going to be yeah. So that's the positive note. But at the same time, you feel kind of selfish. It's stupid, I know, but that's the way you feel. Also, then there's that fear of, oh, they're going to mess it up, things aren't going to be exactly the same. And no, things are not going to be exactly the same. And this is the difference. It's just sometimes they have to change things, so there's time limits, and obviously when you take something from literary form and you make it into a show or a movie, those are two completely different things. And so yeah, there's going to be major differences because so many different factors. And so there's a difference if they change something and you can understand why they changed it, you're oh, time constraints, or, they're unsure of where this is going to go in the future, so they changed that just so it makes a little bit more sense. Oh, they simplified this, so it makes a little bit more sense because they can't elaborate it as much as, the book could elaborate on. So, it's, when there's understandable changes, then I'm oh, that's good, that's okay, I can see why they actually had to change that. And then sometimes there's just changes where I'm really? Like, did that really have to be changed? Like, I don't know. And then sometimes they, like, when something's changed, like, they don't just change it and simplify it. Sometimes they, like, complicate it. Like, they really have, like, a different vision for what happened that's completely contradictory to what the book had in plan and what the book implied, and all of a sudden you're just like, what? So, I don't know. I understand, like, I don't really care for, like, oh, the purists who are like, hey, yay, we, like, hate this because it's going to change what we love. And then, to a certain extent, like, I can understand, you know, wanting to keep things the same and keep things, like, pure. And so it's hard, but, I'm definitely don't like the, like, purists, because sometimes, like, there's little funny adaptations and they don't even like those, and I'm like, look, it's just someone, you know, came up with some, like, nice funny little parody of it, and you're gonna bash on that too. It's like, you still have the original material. Like, if you don't like it being adapted, you don't have to watch it, you don't have to read it, or whatever form of adaptation that it took. You don't have to like it. You could just pretend it didn't exist. Of course it really does exist, but if you don't like it, it doesn't have to be a part of your life. It doesn't have to be a part of your world. And you know, sometimes it's actually really good, and sometimes, you know, you don't have to like it 100%. I mean, when it comes to Game of Thrones, it's a great show. It's well done. I have my, you know, problems with it, but to be honest, like, I can see why it's a great, successful show, and it makes sense why it's so popular. So, I'm not concerned about that. I'm not mad that it was made into an adaptation. I like to watch the show, and I also like to critique it, and I also like to praise it where it deserves to be praised. That's just me. So, yeah, that's about where I stand. So just let me know if you had any experiences where you're like, oh, I really scared that it's going to be adapted wrong, or so on and so forth. Or, you know, how you feel about purists. Like, where do you fall, like, on that? Or you're like, oh, I'm good for anything. I'm good to see them adapt it into whatever they want. Or are you more like, oh, I really feel like they shouldn't do it. They should just keep it the way it is. Like, how, like, where do you fall on that line? I fall, like, kind of like, I'm a little bit selfish and I want to keep it to myself, but then I'm like, I also want to see it come to life and see what happens, but then I'm also scared that they're gonna, like, mess it up, but then I'm like, oh, what if it's really good? It's just, that's where I am. I'm kind of like all over the place, but I'm definitely not a purist where I'm like, oh, every little change is gonna be horrible. I understand some changes, and I understand why they need to happen. Are there changes where I'm completely like, why did they do that? Yes. But are there changes that I'm like, wow, actually that little twist, that little change actually makes a lot of sense. I actually like it. And so, yeah, there's times where I'm like that too. So, sorry I'm going on and rambling, and I don't even know where I have gone in this little discussion that we've had. So, I should probably leave off with that. And you guys can comment and let me know how you feel, and we can talk. So, yeah.